FPL is back, which means Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid is also back. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan. Today we're going to be talking about all those transfer tips ahead of Game Week 12, so hopefully you enjoy this one. Let's get going. By the way, guys, we actually have two Stick to FPL podcast episodes. One was uploaded last week. It was a wildcard special, and the latest one was uploaded today as well. You can check it out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to consume your video or audio podcast format. So go check them out, guys. Banger episode came out today. I would love for you guys to give some feedback on it. A link in the description, or you can just search Stick to FPL. And since it's been a little while, a quick reminder on how this video works. First of all, we're going to be splitting this video into two parts. The first part is going to be about those players that you might already have in your FPL team and working out whether they are worth selling or keeping in your FPL teams. Once we've done that, we'll have a look at the players to replace them with our buys or our avoids. And at the end of it, we're hopefully going to have a good idea on what transfer moves to make. Now, in general, the higher the player is on the list, the higher they are as a priority to keep or buy, and the lower they are, they might be more of a priority for a sell or an avoid. And remember, the two parts of the video are completely separate, so just because a player is a keep doesn't mean they're also a buy, and kind of vice versa throughout the categories. We're going to go position by position, starting off with these forwards, Jackson, Welbeck and Raul Jimenez, who I think are keeps if you do have them in your FPL team right now. Jackson has got some brilliant fixtures coming up, so despite some maybe weaker form over the past 6 game weeks, we definitely are hoping that he can improve in some of these more difficult fixtures. Of course, Jackson maybe carries some risk going forward. He is 1 yellow card away from a suspension, but don't let that put you off too much. Right now, he is good until he does get that suspension, and I think goals could come, particularly in Game Week 12 and 14, where Chelsea faced the newly promoted Leicester and Southampton. Welbeck, another player I would very much like to keep. His fixtures have really looking like they're going to turn around now. Brighton have some great fixtures coming up, and I think Welbeck should play most of these games. He is the man in form for Brighton, and I hope that will continue for him. And Raul Jimenez, another player, I would feel no pressure to sell him whatsoever. It's been a little bit weaker over the last couple of game weeks, but the data is still pretty good for him. You can see he's put up 2.84 XG here with 20 shots. So very, very nice indeed over a 6 game week period. When you add the expected assist here as well, he has been creating for his teammates as well, which is very nice indeed. Wolves up next, not a good time to sell. We expect Fulham, a team in form in general, to perform in that fixture. A few players to monitor here. Havertz, first of all, I'm not totally convinced by him, but I think he is edging more towards the keep section than the sell section. Nottingham Forest is not an amazing fixture, but it is at home. We've got West Ham after that. I think Arsenal's fixtures from an attacking point of view are kind of mid, but Havertz in the earlier stages of the season has been very, very good, and with Ødegaard back, that may allow Havertz to improve and perform a little bit better than he has been recently. Can see him changing the pace of his FPL season of what we've seen recently. Haaland is a monitor. I'm gonna just put him in the middle of this whole section because it is so situational. If you have a couple of free transfers, maybe you don't have Salah in your team, you need to free up some budget somehow, then Haaland, selling him to another forward. We will talk about forward replacements and reallocating that money to bring in a Palmer or a Salah into your FPL team. I do think it's very much worthwhile, but for a lot of people, if you already have a Salah or a Palmer in your team, you might be able to keep Haaland. You may be even able to get all 3 in your team. Don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with Haaland as an FPL asset, as even in the past 6 game weeks, I know his points have been down, but his data is still the best of any player in the Premier League, which does suggest things can improve. I also like the look of this fixture against Spurs. So there is positives and there are negatives to Haaland. We did discuss this in more detail in the podcast this week on Stick to FPL. So if you want a bigger breakdown on Haaland, do go check that out. But for me, he's in the middle, an optional keep or sell. Watkins, similar situation, quite expensive, but I don't think the data has been there for Watkins. And even though the fixtures look pretty good for Aston Villa, I don't know if we can justify spending 9 million on a forward who is just not putting up those numbers, not in good form. You know, only 1 attacking return in the last 5 game weeks is not really good enough. So therefore, do we need to start considering selling a player like Watkins? Maybe. I don't think it's a must sell, and that's because of the good fixtures coming up, but certainly I'm not too confident. I mean, a player with the good form is great in any fixtures, but a player who maybe doesn't have the form, even if they do have the fixtures, that is not a guarantee of results. Wood is also very close to being a sell, but you could potentially hold on to him for Game Week 12, particularly if you can bench him against Arsenal and then play him in Game Week 13 against Ipswich before looking to move him on. I do think he is a player that will be sold by a lot of people in the near future, but I don't think he's an absolute must sell. He may be our player that you might choose to sell if you are looking to go for another forward. You have another forward you really, really like. Maybe Wood is going to be a player that does need to be sacrificed. Once again, Wood, underlying data, not that great, but he is actually performing, massively overperforming, in fact, on that data. Can that continue in the tougher fixtures? I'm not so sure. Now let's move to the sell category. If you have Vardy, he has a potential back issue. We don't know for sure what's going to be the injury situation for a lot of players for Game Week 12. So we do have to take it with a pinch of salt. International break injuries are usually more of a thing for players who actually play for their national teams, which Vardy obviously doesn't play for England anymore. But I think I would look to sell him with a few question marks around his fitness. Maybe some rotation coming up because Leicester do have other forward options now to start ahead of Vardy. And the data is not that good. He's been okay for people, but I don't think he is one of the best forwards moving forward. I think there's a lot of better forwards that we could be looking at going forward. Next, Solanke, poor fixtures coming up. Maybe has a tendency to drop a little bit deeper in certain games, particularly when Spurs are looking to play on the counter-attack. You know, the wingers seem to benefit from that a little bit more. So looking at these tough fixtures, I do have to question whether Solanke can keep it up. He has been disappointing in many game weeks throughout this season, and I think this is a good opportunity to sell him ahead of this away fixture against City. Calvert-Lewin against Brentford, good fixture. Doesn't matter. Calvert-Lewin's form has just been on the floor for so long now. It is just time to release him from your FPL teams if you haven't done so already. On to the keeps. Cole Palmer is actually being sold by a lot of people. And even though he is currently flagged in FPL at time of recording, he does have that yellow Dorito of death next to his name. What we've seen is Palmer is back in training for Chelsea. So that's really, really good information. We're going to get more information on different players throughout the week. But right now, I'm feeling confident that Palmer will be available to play for this phenomenal run of fixtures that Chelsea have. I've spoken about this a lot in the past where I've said that I feel that Palmer thrives, particularly in these fixtures against some of the newly promoted oppositions. Last season, you know, mega hauls against the newly promoted teams last year. I think he'll do it again this year. I think this is where he really becomes value for money. Not to say he can't score in some of the tougher fixtures, but certainly if you're looking for those big 20-pointers, that insanely high ceiling that he has, then these are the fixtures you want him in. That's kind of in contrast to someone like Saka, who is also in the keep section. I don't think Saka is as capable of these mega hauls, even against the easier oppositions, but Saka offers you a lot of consistency. So I think he is worth keeping. Would I sell Saka for a Palmer or a Salah? Maybe, but I would probably try and find a different way of doing that. The next fixtures are okay for Arsenal, but they do get significantly better from game week 16 onwards. So I do think Saka is a long-term hold as long as he is fit for game week 12. We don't know that for sure yet, but international break injuries, usually pretty meaningless, and I'm sure we'll get more information from Arteta, right? I guess we'll see. And Burmo, another player flagged at the moment, but again, international break injuries, not going to take it too seriously at this moment until we get something a little bit more substantial from the press conferences later in the week, looking to see if Burmo trains. But the fixtures are decent for the next two, so I would not be looking to sell Burmo for the next 2 game weeks, although it has to be said that Burmo's data is down and it seems to be dropping off a little bit as he plays in some sort of wider positions, I suppose, with kind of Brentford now having Wissa available to play in those central areas. So Burmo is a keep for the next couple of weeks. I think after that, we may be having some new discussions about him. Monitor Rogers, I don't think he is a sell. I don't think he is a must-keep either, necessarily. He's a good player to have in your squad, though, and you're probably going to bench him for most game weeks. But that said, he's got some brilliant fixtures coming up, and unlike Watkins, he actually has been in form at a significantly cheaper price. So I do still really like Rodgers as an FPL asset. Luis Diaz is one to monitor. Not sure if I would automatically sell him ahead of Southampton. Right now, Luis Diaz's minutes are probably more secure than they will be when Jota and Chiesa are back. I don't know when that's going to be. Probably going to be soon, but I think Luis Diaz has a decent chance of playing against Southampton. And if he does, brilliant. That's really good stuff. Really good fixture for Liverpool to get some goals. But after that, Luis Diaz is probably going to become a sell from game week 13 onwards. For now, one to monitor. Foden, another player to monitor. Like the fixtures, like the data, don't like the results, but I guess depends on his fitness. Do we think he's going to play against Spurs? Lots to be seen. Heung-min Son is in here as well. Because of his price, if he is blocking you from getting Salah and Palmer in particular in your team, then Son would be a player I would sell. But if you can have Palmer, Son, and Salah in your team all at once, I don't think there's too much wrong with keeping Son, as he is a player that does typically thrive in some of the more difficult fixtures. And if we're looking for a counter-attacking player like Son, he is the counter-attacking specialist of the Premier League, then these fixtures kind of suit him in a way. So I wanted to put that one out there. Don't think Son is a must sell. McNeil, I would be looking to ditch as Everton look more and more defensive in their setup. And the fixtures there's some okay ones in here. There's some tough ones coming up though. And Everton's fixtures in general are looking to take a nosedive in the near future. So I would be more comfortable selling a player like McNeil. Johnson and Maddison would be players that I would look to bin as well. Johnson, I don't trust him in the tough fixtures as much as I do Son. We know that Johnson gets a lot of chances to score, but he's just not clinical enough to, get FPL returns regularly, maybe against some of the tougher oppositions. And Maddison, with his rotation risk and the difficult fixtures, is going to be a sell for me as well. Arsenal defenders, I think, in general, are going to be keeps. They're actually putting up the best underlying defensive data of any team in the Premier League over the past 6 game weeks. Only 4.4 non-penalty expected goals against, despite them conceding 9 goals. So I think that will regress to the mean. That will average out as we come up against some teams, which I think are much better kind of fixtures for clean sheets for Arsenal, starting with Forest and then West Ham. And a couple of games after that, I even trust Arsenal to get the occasional clean sheet there as well. Gabriel also has a decent amount of attacking threat, so you never know when you're going to get something from him. I'll be looking to keep Dalot for the next 2 game weeks as well. I think his minutes are reasonably secure in the short term, just while we wait for Luke Shaw to come back. There's always going to be some question marks around Manchester United, given the new system, but I don't think he's worth selling necessarily. But would I be buying him? Probably not. But the buy section is coming later, guys. Just be patient. Gavardio is another player I would quite possibly keep and hope that he keeps scoring goals. Again, not a player I would buy necessarily, but I don't think he is a must-sell player necessarily. I'd be happy to keep him, although I have to admit, I did struggle a little bit with the defenders to sell, because there is actually quite a lot of defenders who I'd quite like to sell this week, but is it worth it? The defenders aren't doing too much at the moment. But anyway, let's move on. Lewis one to monitor, particularly with a busy fixture schedule ahead over the end of November, December period, really. It could get a little bit tougher to predict Lewis minutes, and the fixtures aren't great in the next 2. Could be an opportunity to hop off, but he's far from a priority sell for me. I think he's okay to keep if you want to. Trent Alexander-Arnold here, one to monitor. If he's available for this game week, I would certainly be looking to keep him. I don't think he will be, to be honest, but I do still think Trent is one of the best defensive options in the game at the moment. So if you can afford to keep him even on your bench for 1 week, I would be okay with that. I don't think he's a must sell necessarily, unless you're trying to fund some other moves, maybe with a double transfer. Monitor Burn, he's a nice cheap defender here. Don't think you have to sell him, even though he's suspended for game week 12. From game week 13 onwards, I think he is going to be a fine rotation option defender for you. And Monitor Romero, he has potentially picked up an aggravation of his injury over the international break, but I don't mind Romero as a pick, generally speaking. But again, the fixtures for Spurs are pretty bad, which is why we do have 2 Spurs players in the sell category. Van de Ven, I think, is less likely to be available, and I think it might be time to move him on. Doesn't have quite as much attacking threat as Romero either, in my opinion. So therefore, an easier sell for me. Keane was never a buy in the first place. We've put Keane in the avoid section pretty much every single game week, so no surprise. Now everyone's got him. He is going to be a sell. Branthwaite is just going to be playing ahead of him, so Keane's minutes are going to be in the bin. Pretty useless FPL asset at 4.3 million, particularly if you bought him at one of the higher prices there. Pedro Porro at 5.5 is also a little bit too expensive for me to be playing during this tough run of fixtures, and we have seen in general his attacking threat has diminished quite significantly. Obviously, he did get an assist last game week, but outside of that, not really been too much there for him. And guys, if you are enjoying this video, make sure you do drop a like. Really does help out the channel, and do subscribe if you're new around here as well. But I suppose you're wondering, we know who we're going to sell. Who are we going to buy, though? Well, let's start off with some forwards, and Isak is the top of my shopping list right now. I was waiting for that Nottingham Forest fixture out the way in Game Week 11 before we started speaking about Isak as a serious FPL option, but man, he dominated even in that game, which I was not expecting at all. He's looking so sharp at the moment, really the talisman of an improving Newcastle team, and the fixtures from here just are good. We've got West Ham, Palace, at Brentford in 15. Good fixtures after 15 as well. It's just that game week 14 fixture at home against Liverpool that you worry about. But if anyone is scoring in that game for Newcastle, it's probably going to be Isak. Penalty taker as well, which is super useful. I love this FPL pick, and he would be my #1 buying target for this week. My second target would be João Pedro, if you don't have him already. Only just returned from injury, but some really positive comments from Hertzler suggesting that essentially what we already know. João Pedro is Brighton's best player. And the best players, the talismans, they play every week. João Pedro is to Brighton what Isak is to Newcastle, Salah is to Liverpool, Saka is to Arsenal, Palmer is to Chelsea, etc, etc. So we've got a 5.4 million talisman of his team on penalties, really nice fixtures, and is he 100% nailed? I don't want to say that quite yet. There could be a little bit of rotation, but I expect him to play 90% of games, which at this price is good enough for me. And he's already proven what he can do from the bench as well, as seen in Game Week 11, where he netted a goal and an assist. So, João Pedro, I have the confidence for a player this cheap. Bargain, game breaking, get him in your team if you haven't done already. Nicholas Jackson is going to be our final buy. Do still prefer Isak and João Pedro, but Jackson would come in third here just because of these great fixtures coming up, and I do think he can turn his form around just a little bit. Evan Nielsen, definitely a player to monitor. Do like the look of him, generally speaking. João Pedro is my favourite cheap forward to go for, but Evan Nielsen would probably be my second favourite to bring in Game Week 12. Brighton at home, Wolves away, then Ipswich in 15. Even that Spurs at home in 14 is not too bad either. Scoring goals in good form, but he is overperforming quite significantly, so be aware of that one. But with the good fixtures, that is going to breed more opportunities to continue that good form, build that confidence even more, and really take him to the top. Wissa is on monitor. I don't mind him as an FPL pick, but I do worry a little bit about him in the slightly longer term. The next two fixtures are good for him, but after that, we do see some more difficult fixtures, as well as the likes of Igor Thiago maybe coming back and maybe taking Wissa's place as the central striker, pushing Wissa to the left wing. So in the next 2 game weeks, I do think Wissa is a good pick. After that, I do worry a little bit. Are you looking for something super short term? Are you okay with going for something super short term? Do you think he can make the points worthwhile that you might have to transfer him back out in a couple of weeks? That is going to be up to you, and that is why he is in the monitor section. Welbeck also a monitor, just because, you know, when we're looking at a straight battle between João Pedro and Welbeck, for me, João Pedro takes the podium spot there. So not sure I would be looking to get Welbeck necessarily, but that doesn't mean he's a bad pick at all. It's just circumstantial with him. And Cunha, this is going to be controversial, but I don't know, Fulham away, it's a terrible fixture right now. Fulham are in great form, and even though Cunha has been getting the FPL points, he has been scoring goals, what we have to look at here is that he hasn't had a single big chance in the last 6 game weeks. He's only generated 0.84 XG in the past 6 game weeks. So if I'm using my free transfers to bring him in, I'm probably not going to do it in game week 12. I would wait a little bit longer, if possible, before bringing him in. Now, one thing we should credit Cunha with is that his creativity is good. He is a set piece taker, and he is likely to be on penalties if Sarabia is not on the pitch. And all in all, I think he's an okay pick. If you're on a wild card, I would definitely be considering bringing him in now, ready for later. But if you're not on a wild card, you're just looking to bring in a new player, a new forward for game week 12 and beyond, Cunha is probably not the player I'd go for. Controversial, but I'm putting that out there. As for some avoids, Delap overperforming again, maybe quite significantly here. Maybe not as much as Cunha, but still quite a lot. So not sure I would be looking to bring in Delap. The fixtures over the next two are not great for him either. So I think we would just park this pick. We also know he's not 100% nailed, and that is going to depend on the tactical matchup. Watkins, there is argument to keep him, but I don't think there's much argument to buy him given his poor form and very high price tag. And this is just not the week to bring in Wood either. Away against Arsenal, we can do a lot better. If you want to bring Wood in game week 13, fair enough, but even after that, the fixtures are pretty rubbish. Cole Palmer is going to be top of my buy list. I think he is just a player to buy ahead of these fixtures. Absolutely phenomenal. I think he's going to be an essential player, and I just cannot imagine life without Palmer in my FPL team. That sounds pretty scary. Salah, probably the best captain for game week 12, which makes him a buy as well. And even this Man City game, I don't think is as bad of a fixture for Salah as maybe we would have presumed it to be a couple of weeks ago. So Salah with his great form, great numbers, captain option for a lot of game weeks. He's definitely got to be in the conversation to buy if you don't have him already. Also really like Bruno Fernandes ahead of this Ipswich fixture. Expect him to be playing in a very advanced position moving forward under new manager Amorim. Again, we did a big deep dive into Manchester United in the podcast uploaded today. So go check that out, stick to FPL. And it's like the first thing we talk about is Manchester United's new system and how that is going to benefit certain players. So if you want to, I don't know, if you want to be convinced on Bruno, that is probably the place to go. Saka want to monitor. I don't think he's a must-buy, but he's certainly one of the better pickups ahead of game week 12. The fixtures aren't amazing, but if you haven't got Palmer and Salah, I would say they are higher priorities than him. Rodgers is definitely a player you could potentially pick up, particularly if you're looking to get a cheap midfielder in, maybe to fund other moves. Semenyo is also in a similar category, but drops slightly lower just because of his potential injury. We need to keep an eye on that. I think he's probably going to be fine, but we don't know, of course, yet. But the fixtures are really nice for Semenyo. For Smith Rowe, also don't mind him as a pick, player to monitor. Would I buy him though? I'm not totally sure, because whilst there are some good fixtures, there's no amazing fixtures, and there are also some tough fixtures in there as well. So not totally sure I'm ready for a Smith Rowe in my team. Think I prefer Rodgers and Semenyo at this present moment if you are looking for a cheap guy. Avoid Mbeumo. Yes, Mbeumo is a keep and an avoid. There is such thing. This is possible for this to happen. It does happen sometimes. I just don't think I would buy Mbeumo at this point at 7.9 million. If you bought him for like 7.1 million, like that, you've got him for a great price. He's still got a couple of good fixtures, well worth keeping. But if you're looking to pick him up now at 7.9 million with only 2 good fixtures left, he's now playing in a different position. His attacking returns are starting to dry up a little bit. I think you may have missed the boat on Mbeumo, really. So I would just try and maybe target some different midfielders ahead of game week 12 and beyond. Garnacho is also going to be a void. I'm not sure where he is even going to play for Manchester United going forward. Is he going to play kind of behind the striker? Is he going to play in a fullback position? Is he going to be left out on the bench because of the system that Amorim wants to play? I don't know. Lots of question marks around Garnacho, and for that reason, I would not be looking to take that risk. And Luis Diaz, I would not be looking to buy him ahead of some rougher fixtures for Liverpool with the rotation risk coming up very, very soon. The data is not really there either, to be fair. So Luis Diaz from the first part of the season seems to be very much a thing of the past. Would not be looking to buy him. All right, time for some defenders. Been looking forward to this one because I've handpicked you guys a couple of hidden gems, a couple of differentials that not too many people are talking about, but we'll do that here. So first of all, let's go through the obvious ones. Gabriel and Hall look like really solid buys to me. I would love to have an Arsenal defender in my team for this next run of fixtures. I think just safe, secure, glue player in your FPL squad. You just play them every week and maybe rotate some other defenders around him. I think Gabriel suits that role from a tactical perspective in FPL perfectly. Will get you clean sheets, will get the occasional goal, and should hopefully bring smiles to your faces. Hall also looks like a really nice cheap option right now. His attacking data, particularly creative data, is pretty decent right now, and Newcastle are a team on the up with a couple of nice fixtures. I think in particular, Hall makes a really nice rotation defender to have in your team, but he is a player who you bring in for the next couple of game weeks, and if you've got an Aït-Nouri in your team, for example, he rotates really nicely over the tougher fixtures for Aït-Nouri, and you can kind of do things that way. I think Hall works really nicely as a cheap rotation option that you can play for the next 2 game weeks. But Timber is going to be my third buy here on this list, a differential, but we have got confirmation that Ben White is going to be out for a significant period of time. We're looking at anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. So that is the entire Christmas period. That is like 15 game weeks that Ben White is going to miss, which means that Timber, in theory, should be reasonably nailed for that duration in the right back position, and at 5.5 million, it's a really cheap entry point to that Arsenal defence. And Timber does have a little bit of attacking threat as well. He's not like a player who has 0 attacking threat. He has a little bit, something there. Good fixtures like we mentioned. If you can't afford a Gabriel, or maybe you want to save a little bit of your money for future transfers, maybe Timber could be the answer to your problems. I think I'll be looking to monitor these Liverpool defenders. Yes, the Southampton fixture is good, but the Man City and Newcastle games after that, I'm not so keen on. Liverpool's fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag at the moment. So even though they have been the best defence in the Premier League so far, in the more difficult fixtures, can they sustain that? So far, we've seen that that's not really been the case. They have been conceding goals in the tougher fixtures. Even though it's only been like 1 goal per game, it is still something to take note of. A little bit of attacking threat for Virgil, but that does come at a significant price tag. And even though Konate has got attacking returns this season, I would not at all consider him a player with consistent attacking threat. We haven't seen that throughout his career at Liverpool. A couple of differentials here that I think are well worth monitoring. These are players I like for a wild card in particular, and they are Digne and Kerkez, 2 attacking fullbacks. Now, Digne, I would love to buy him, but there is some worry about rotation with midweek fixtures coming up. But Digne's form has been incredible for club, for country. He scored scored a free kick against Italy for France and got 2 assists in the same game as well. Absolutely dominating that game. He seems to be in the form of his life at the moment for, like I say, for club and for country. So with some good fixtures here, like Crystal Palace at home, Southampton at home, there is going to be some opportunities for those 12 pointers, those 15 pointers, these mythical scores that we love from our defenders. But be aware, rotation is a possibility over a busier period for Digne. So got to put that one out there. And that's why we can't put him any higher than that. But if you want to take a risk, he is definitely a high-risk, high-reward defender you can go for. Kerkez, similar-ish situation. Not sure this is the week to buy him, but definitely a player I want to monitor right now. A little bit of creativity, cheap price tag, playing for a mid-table defense. That's kind of what we're looking for a cheap defender. And I think this is the way our kind of defenses are going to move going forward. Cheap, mid-table defenses capable of occasional clean sheets with a little bit of attacking impetus. Kind of what we like. And avoid Mazraoui. Yeah, concerns around minutes and stuff. He's just too risky for me. I don't know how Man United are going to set up. And I know some people in the comment section will be like, oh, I know exactly how Man United are going to set up. I guarantee there are 100 other people listening who have a very different idea to you. And everyone thinks they know. But let's be honest, new manager, it is a very risky time in FPL. If you're super confident in yourself and your opinions, by all means, it's not for me though. I just think a couple of good fixtures. These are kind of the fixtures I want to get an idea of who is going to be playing. And even after that, Luke Shaw coming back, Dalot, other players like Anthony or, Garnacho, could they play in the wing-back positions? There's a lot of confusion in my mind. I don't want to touch them. I don't want to touch these Man United fullbacks right now. Aït-Nouri, great pick in general, but would I be buying him right now if I didn't already have him? Probably not, because I don't like the next 2 fixtures for him. As an Aït-Nouri owner, I am going to be benching him, so I certainly wouldn't recommend buying him. And Aina, yes, he's got the points recently, but the fixtures are absolutely horror. He is not typically an attacking defender at all. One screamer doesn't change that too much for me. And I think he is a player to avoid, certainly at 4.8 million, which is actually getting quite expensive when we compare him to like Hall or Kirkes, Digne. Like he's approaching Konate levels of price or Timber levels of price. Maybe not quite there, but getting towards that. Let's round up with some goalkeepers. I'll be looking to keep Sells and Raya if I had them. Sell Areola and Edison. If you're looking for a new goalkeeper, Verbruggen and Sanchez would probably be my 2 favourites right now. And avoid Callagher. His time is very limited, as Alisson could even be back in game week 12. And Pickford, just the Everton fixtures get very rough from here on, and I think we could see things get a little bit worse for Everton before they get better. So a very quick one on the goalkeepers there. But of course, if there are any players that you want to talk about that I didn't mention in today's video, let me know in the comment section and I will rate them. Are they a buy, a sell, a keep, or an avoid? All about that categorization, right, guys? But yeah, appreciate you guys watching this. If you enjoyed, do drop a like, do subscribe if you are new around here as well. And I will see you tomorrow for an 100 experts video, which I'm very excited about. I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.